Hey everybody, Jeppy here, and I thought it would be really cool if we came up with passive abilities for every single agent in Valorant. For those of you that are unaware of what a passive ability is, it's a small little buff that is given to a particular character that is unique to only them, or is a small buff for that character that they don't really have to do anything to gain that buff. Valorant actually already has a few agents that have passive abilities already. Jett has one, for example, where if she is descending from a higher elevation to a lower one and holds her jump button on the keyboard while doing so, she slowly floats down to the ground. This works perfectly with Jett, especially paired with her updrafts and Bladestorm abilities. It's not an ability Jett has to buy, it just happens and is always there. Phoenix has a passive called Heating Up that instead of taking damage with his molly and wall, like every other agent, even friendlies, he heals up from it for a total of 50 HP with each ability. Viper actually has two passives, with Fuel being one of them that gets consumed when she uses her wall and Poison Orb, and she has another ability called Toxin that automatically applies DK whenever an enemy passes through or steps into any of her abilities besides her molly. Also, Neon's passive is called Energy. It's the bar that is consumed whenever she runs using high gear, or the bar that decreases when she uses her overdrive ultimate, but replenishes every time she gets a kill in her ult. Fade's passive is Terror Trail, where any ability she uses that marks an enemy starts a trail that tracks the location and can be locked onto with her prowlers. Now, with all those agents with passives already out of the way, every other agent in Valorant currently does not have a passive ability. So let's first start off with Brimstone. I think Brim should have a passive called Leader, because obviously, well, he is the leader of the Valorant protocol after all. Now, what should this leader ability do? Well, I think it would be cool if any agent that is standing within a certain range of Brimstone should have any ability that recharges during a round after use recharge faster. So basically, like pretty much all the E abilities in the game that you could use a couple times around if you stay alive, you know, the ones that replenish. Maybe with this leader passive with Brimstone, abilities of his teammates could recharge like 15 through 20% faster, which could lead to quicker site executes onto site if you're waiting for a Fade Haunt or a Silver Recon Dart, for example, to start the push. What do you guys think of this passive? Is it too strong, or does it play well with the leader mentality of Brimstone with having his teammates stay near him if they want their E abilities on a shorter cooldown? Our next passive ability is going to be on Omen. Now, I'm super psyched about this one because I actually got this idea from Alicia Harris, a subscriber, on my last Jeppy mailbox video, but I want to capitalize on her idea of having Omen have quieter footsteps. Let's name this passive ability Distortion, and what it does is it decreases the noise Omen makes with everything he does by a certain percent. Everything besides the sounds made by shooting a gun, because that'd just be broken. So that covers footsteps, falling from a height, defusing, planting, everything. Now, I don't want it to be anywhere near silent, just slightly quieter. Defusing might be a big issue if it's quieter, but if it's too much, we could simply just not have the defusing or planting of the spike be quieter. This passive would fit Omen really well, in my opinion. He's all about being sneaky, especially with his ultimate and Shadow Step. Oh yeah, and his Shadow Step would probably be quieter as well, so maybe you could pull off some pretty sneaky or deceiving plays at that too. So hopefully with this small buff to Omen, it'll make people more scared of Omen and surprise people even more when he flanks or goes for crazy plays. Next up is going to be Killjoy. So I wanted something that would fit her engineering character theme Killjoy has, but I kind of struggled with KJ when deciding a passive for her. So maybe we can name her passive Technician, and what it does is it benefits Killjoy with any interactive object on a Valorant map. So Ascent, for example, when KJ herself closes a door on A site or B site, it closes way faster. Also, I think it would be really cool if Killjoy's passive Technician was if a door was broken, she could go up to that door and repair it with the animation. What do you guys think about that? Now, for maps that have teleporters, maybe when KJ goes through a teleporter, she could go back to the one she stepped into, you know, the sending teleporter, if she doesn't open the doors of the receiving teleporter within 5 seconds of taking the TP. It'll play a different TP sound if she were to go back to the previous teleporter, so it doesn't sound like two players, you know, hopped in it, and the enemy team can hear that she at least went back to the sending teleporter. And any map that has ropes like Fracture or Icebox, for example, she could take them quicker and has a better spray pattern than other agents when going across them. Do you think this is too strong for Killjoy, or a fun little niche KJ has on interacting with things on the map? Our next passive is going to be on Cypher. Now, I want to have a passive for Cypher that gives him more information than any other agent. Plus, Cypher is really weak right now in the meta, so he needs a strong passive to kind of help him out. So what about we call his passive vitals? And Cypher has a hub that you could pull up, maybe by hitting the tab bar, you know, the same button that pulls out the scoreboard, and it lists the HP and shield of all the agents on the enemy team at all times. It would really help out Cypher and his team a ton, especially if you're unsure how much, you know, HP the enemy has and if you dinked someone or not, and if they ended up buying shields on save rounds too. This could be incredibly strong though, so what do you guys think? Is it too strong, or is it just right for Cypher? Our next passive is for Sova, and we're gonna call it Deadeye. I actually got this idea from a Jeppy mailbox question, which sparked the theme for this video. It's a fantastic passive idea that channels Sova's lifetime of hunting skills. The Deadeye passive will make Sova's recoil and lower RPM not as bad as the rest of the agents when he ADSs. Now, while he's ADSing, we don't want his Vandal or Phantom to turn into like lasers, because that would be like broken and not fun. But maybe with this small ADS buff, it'll give Sova more options to hold long and tight angles, and maybe it'll make ADSing a viable strategy. The next passive we have is for Sage. Now, Sage is an interesting spot in the meta right now, only really being viable on a few maps. To make Sage more of a desirable pick and dig deeper into her healing theme of of Sage, I think it would be cool for any agent to be standing in a very close proximity of Sage to be healed up by a certain amount over a period of time. We can call her passive Lifeline, and maybe within a few meters of Sage, your teammates get healed 2 HP for every 5 seconds they're next to Sage. Of course, it'll take a long time to like get this balance out perfectly with Riot, but it's not a ton of HP being accumulated. Like, if you really think about it, you know, it kind of does add up over a decent amount of time, but like within 20 seconds, you only be up 8 HP. But what do you guys think? Is this too strong, or is it underwhelming, and only a really tiny HP increase over time doesn't really affect the outcome of a round very much, especially with like one-tap headshot weapons or an op, for example? Now, we have to skip Phoenix and Jet because they already have passives. So now let's move on to Reyna's passive. Let's call her passive Dark Devotion. And I think a cool little passive she can have would be that every time a bullet hits an enemy player, a dark purple shadow starts to appear on the edge of your screen, the enemy that got hit, and slowly closes in, lowering your field of view. The enemy player can revert this by going into animation, rubbing their eyes or something like that. They can clear their vision again. Reyna is really weak before she gets any kills, so maybe it might make it a little easier for her to get that first kill in a round if she can tap an enemy for damage and close in on them while their field of view is slowly decreasing, or catch them in that animation of rubbing their eyes. Now, an enemy player, if they wanted to, when they got hit by Reyna's bullets, they can choose just to ignore it, because I don't want their field of view to decrease by so much to where it's like unplayable, but just enough to cause it inconvenience if they don't try to get rid of it by rubbing their eyes. Next up, we have Raze. Now, the best thing about Raze is her ability to create space with her blast packs and, you know, going up in the air. So let's amplify that slightly. Let's name her passive Lightweight. We can have it to where Raze can jump higher than any other agent in Valorant. Nothing like crazy, like she can't jump as high as like a Jet updraft or something, but just a little something to make her maneuverability in the air better. I'm not a Raze player at all, so I'm not even sure if a higher jump will help her out with their blast packs. If not, but if it really doesn't, then maybe in the comments we could come up with something better for a Raze passive. Maybe we could do something with music or her being able to hear really well instead. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts? Next up, we have Breach. So Breach is not the strongest initiator, but is starting to see some play on other maps besides just Fracture. So let's try to get a passive ability for Breach that might help him with versatility he can use on other maps. Let's call his passive Opportunity. And what it does is it can change all his abilities from a longer yet narrow field of view, like how it is right now, to a shorter yet far wider area of effect. Take his stun, for example. Normally, it's a very narrow yet far-reaching area of effect. Maybe Breach can switch it to a shorter and wider stun whenever he wants. It won't go as far, but the area effect from side to side will be much bigger, hopefully catching more people. Also, that same thing can be applied to his aftershock damaging ability. He can choose to have it to do its normal version, or he can change it to where if it falls onto the other side of a wall, it's in a sideways action to cover more side to side ground instead of like front to back. Oh, what do you guys think about this? I think his ult is already strong enough, so we don't need to change that. Next for passive is going to be Skye. Now, Skye can pretty much do everything already. She's a jack of all trades, but master at none. So what can we do to make Skye really good at one thing while also still being able to do a bunch of other things at a decent level as well? Maybe let's try to focus on Skye being able to get information from being rewarded on a good play. Now, this passive I'm about to suggest probably is going to be very strong, so I might need you guys to tell me if we need to tweak this or not. But let's call her passive Pressure. And what it does is that the first time Skye herself gets a kill in a round, a Seeker will spawn, but it needs to be a headshot kill to spawn a Seeker. You know, the same jellyfish looking Seeker she spawns out when she launches her ult. It's something that'll happen somewhat frequently, but not all the time. Skye needs to get a headshot kill as her first kill in the round for a Seeker to spawn. If her first kill isn't a headshot, then it won't spawn, even if her next kill is a headshot. So it has to be the first one. It would be a very good way to get early information or clutch out a round if it's 2v1 and Skye hasn't gotten a kill yet, but she got a headshot kill on one of the enemies and the Seeker finds the other one to clutch it out. What do you guys think? Next is Yoru. Now, Yoru is the king of deception. So let's try to think of a passive that'll help out the deceiving aspect of his character. Let's call his passive Who's Who. And what this passive does is it always sounds like Yoru has two pairs of footsteps whenever he is walking. So anytime Yoru isn't shift walking, you know, when he's just normally running, it sounds like two people are running, which would do wonders in deceiving the enemy. It would be really easy to fake a hit onto sight when the enemies think they hear two people walking, but it's just Yoru. Now, if you pair that passive with one of his clones, and now it sounds like three people are running at you, it'll be so hard to determine as an enemy if it's Yoru faking a hit or if there really is half of the team running at you. I think this would be a really interesting buff to Yoru and really help in tricking the enemy team, which is something that Yoru is really good at already. Well, in the right hands. Our next agent passive is going to be Astra. Now, what do we do with Astra that'll help her out without making her extremely strong again and go back to the super oppressive global agent she used to be before her nerfs? Well, one thing that's annoying with Astra is that if you have a team that isn't communicating, like if you're solo queuing and no one's talking at all, it's hard to know when to smoke or do anything with the star that's across the map. Maybe a buff that'll help with that is that anytime an enemy walks really close to one of your stars, a notification pops up on your HUD that an enemy is near it. Now, I don't want Astra to be a hyper information gatherer, so if she has multiple stars across the map, it won't alert you to which star an enemy is nearby though. It'll simply just tell you that, hey, near one of your stars is an enemy. So if you have only one star out, it's pretty easy to know where the enemy is, but that's the only one. But if you have multiple stars out across the map, you kind of have to guess which one of the stars it is that is alerting you. It'll help a ton with reacting to when you should suck, concuss, or smoke a star with Astra, and it might help out the solo queue experience with Astra too. Next up is our boy KO. Now, KO is already incredibly strong in the meta right now, so currently I don't think he should really have a strong passive, so let's give him something a little weaker. Maybe something like KO doesn't take any fall damage at all, because I mean, he is a robot and a really advanced and sturdy one at that, so why does he take fall damage in the first place, right? So we can call his passive quote. It makes sense, because it just does make sense. If you guys aren't really a fan of it being to where he just doesn't take any fall damage, we can give him an extra passive to where maybe his melees are a little stronger, because I'm sure getting stabbed by a robot, a super strong and advanced robot, is probably going to do way more damage than a normal human. Are you guys able to come up with something else for KO that is a really small buff without going too overboard, because KO is already really strong and counters pretty much every agent in the game? All right, so since Neon and Fade already have passive abilities, let's end off with the strongest agent at the time of recording for this video, Chamber. I want to give a passive for him that really won't affect him too much, but it's just a nice little buff. We're gonna name his passive Bandolier, and what it does is that Chamber replenishes ammo in his magazine with one bullet every 2 seconds all the time. No, not his Headhunter or Tour de Force ult, but his primary and secondary weapons. I think it would actually fit Chamber decently well, because as I say, he's spraying through a smoke. He could swap to his Headhunter or his ult, you know, to keep up the pressure for a little bit, but during that whole time, Bandolier's passive ability is replenishing his magazine one bullet every 2 seconds. So then after a short while, he can swap back to his primary, and it should have replenished, you know, at least a couple bullets at this point. After 10 seconds, for example, he would have 5 bullets being added back into his magazine with this Bandolier passive ability. I don't know, it's a little something to give Chamber passive without being super strong, because right now Chamber doesn't need any buffs. Well, since Agent 21 hasn't come out yet when making this video, we're all done. Remember guys, to leave your thoughts down below, and if you enjoyed the video, then make sure you like, subscribe, notifications if you're new. Now with all that being said, Jeppy!